remember students were talking about locations of businesses and why they locate where they're located, and we've looked at that triangle and how there is an interplay between labor, resources, and transportation. We always have to consider that. And then we're also considering if there are multiple places that the raw materials come from, considering that as well. And then adding to it, time-space compression, how much things have changed over the years. So we're looking at Weber's theories, and Weber's theories, while valuable and still can be applied to a certain extent, have really changed because of the way the world's transportation has improved. So it's made a big difference. So now we're going to look at one other thing that is considered when choosing a location, and that is when you have a labor-oriented market. For example, Hollywood. Hollywood has a cluster of people who know how to act and do all of the other things that are, connected with making movies and TV. And if you went to a different location, now, for example, let's say that, property's cheaper in Oklahoma, so you're like, I'm going to build a studio in Oklahoma, and I'm going to try to make movies out of Oklahoma primarily. You're going to run into problems because you're not going to find the talent, at least right away. It's going to take a long time to draw talent into Oklahoma. So you're going to have a hard time making your movies. So there are reasons that you would want to locate beyond price or resources, especially if the thing that really makes your business run is the labor. So in this case, actors and all the other support staff in making movies is the labor. And it's a really specific skill set that you can't find that everywhere in the United States, because all of the people who are interested in that are drawn to primarily two places, New York City and Hollywood. So if you want to make movies, where do you need to locate? You need to locate in Hollywood. Also, there is going to be locational interdependence in this place as well. For example, if you need certain supplies for your movie, you're going to find those supplies in Hollywood. So I would assume, I've never really spent much time in Hollywood, but I would assume that there's a lot of costume companies in Hollywood. And I did tell second period about this. I didn't tell sixth period about this, how I had a friend of a friend who he was in charge of like all things animals, like whenever movies have animals in it, he was kind of like, he managed that whole like animal thing. I'm sure he's not the only guy that did it. There's probably a lot of people who do that, but he was one of the guys. And where did he live? He lived near Hollywood. So people who support movies are going to be there as well. And so those would be part of that cluster of suppliers for your industry. So bulk gaining industries don't keep all the supplies around, because if they kept all the supplies around, their storage costs would be astronomical. Because when you think about it, storage is property. So that whatever the land costs are in the area, if you're storing something on it, it's going to cost money, because land costs money. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to surround themselves with suppliers that can bring them what they need at, the last minute, or, within a day or two. And so, for example, a bulk gaining industry would be making airplanes. Well, if you're making an airplane, you're not going to have all of your product supply. You're not going to have everything that you need for making an airplane. I can't even imagine the number of parts it takes to make an airplane. You're not going to have all of those parts laying around the airplane manufacturing plant. For example, seats. I can guarantee you they don't have seats lying around, because seats take up a lot of room, right? They're pretty hefty things. So there is going to be some company that specializes in those seats. So it's kind of like they're outsourcing, and we're going to talk about that. Outsourcing, what that means. They're outsourcing that part of their business, and they are buying those products from that company. And so they need to, like, when they get to the point in building their airplane where they need the seats, they need them right away. So it's like they got to rush them in there and bring them in there so they can get them installed. Okay, so companies do consider government when they are establishing businesses. And sometimes what they're looking at is, do we have a trade agreement with this company or country? So trade agreements are really important, and one of them that you do need to be aware of is NAFTA. I'm pretty sure your book addresses it as NAFTA. No, I'm 100% sure. They address it as NAFTA. And but just recently under the Trump administration, it was changed to the USMCA, which is essentially the same as NAFTA, but under a new name, because that was one of the things Trump tried to do, is like just change everything that was done prior to him, just so he could kind of like put his name on it and say, look, I fixed that. But it's essentially the same as NAFTA. And the idea, so NAFTA stands for North American Free Trade Agreement. So the countries of North America that are primarily involved with this are Canada, United States, and Mexico. So there is free trade between those countries. So once NAFTA passed, what happened? What was a really common thing that happened is that the United States would build something in Mexico called a maquiladora. And these are American factories that are built in Mexico. And why did they do that? Because when they are importing goods that are, maybe finished products that are manufactured in Mexico, or maybe parts that are manufactured in Mexico, the United States doesn't have to pay any tariffs on the import of those goods. So that's one thing that is considered when you're locating your business, where you're locating it. Other things that are considered are tax breaks and incentives. So different government entities, it can be at the national level, but it can also be at a smaller scale, or a bigger scale. It can be at a local scale, let's say, so like state level or county level, where states will say, hey, locate here in our state because we don't, have any corporate tax. And so, businesses maybe in a state like California, which has high corporate tax, they may go, hey, it would be cheaper to run business in Texas because they don't have corporate tax, and then they'll move their manufacturing to Mexico. And so that actually happened just recently with Tesla. So Tesla was based in the United States, in the United States, but also based in California from its inception. And with the COVID restrictions, they were told they could not manufacture cars anymore. And so they decided to move. They moved down to Texas. And so now the cars are being manufactured in Texas just to avoid California's rules on COVID. Okay. So another thing that companies look for is they want to locate in a country that has reliable rules and law enforcement, not super corrupt, that they have good infrastructure, so they have good roads, railroads, whatever they need to get around. Because if you are hobbled by dirt roads, it doesn't matter how cheap the labor is, or how cheap the property is, or how close you are to a natural resource, if you can't get your product to the market because there's no roads. Okay, so then you might have to build a road. So suddenly it's not cheap anymore because you're building a road. So what companies do, they're going to look for countries that are pretty stable, have cheap labor. So like think about China. There's a lot of American companies that are running out of China. Why? China's really stable. You could argue that there's a fair amount of corruption in China, but it's a pretty stable country. And that's one thing that centrally planned governments like China, central planning makes countries very, very stable. So so they're pretty stable, and it makes sense. And what's the other country? So India is another one. They're relatively stable as well. They're more of a democracy than China, much more of a democracy, but they also have a certain level of stability that, say, maybe Ethiopia or Yemen or Syria would not have. Okay, so now we're going to look at the term footloose. So footloose means it's easy to relocate the business, so that there's not a lot of like heavy capital involved with the business. And so what do I mean by heavy capital? I mean like big heavy machines, or like big huge buildings, things that are really hard to move. So if you think about a typical business around town that would be really easy to move, like maybe tax preparing, because like, what do you need to prepare taxes? A computer. Can you walk around with a computer? These days you can. It's really easy. So tax preparing would be footloose. Real estate office. You think about real estate people, most of them don't actually even work in an office. They totally work remotely anymore. And so the more remote a business can be, the more footloose it can be. So you guys right now have been really footloose. Your school has been footloose. Does it feel footloose? I bet it doesn't. But the fact that you are able to do school at home, that your teachers are at their home, everybody is at home with their computer, it's kind of become footloose. 2 years ago, would I have said that? No way. I would have never said that, because I would have never thought that we could have conducted school like we're doing right now. But the fact of the matter is we are, and it's working for some kids, not all of them, but some of you are doing really well. Okay, so how flexible is it to move a business? Now, another thing that you need to consider is, for example, a doctor might be kind of footloose, right? Because, a doctor's office, if it's, it doesn't have a ton of equipment. Most of the equipment that it does have is pretty movable. But the thing is, doctors establish like patient lists, and they have a relationship with certain people. And so then if they just pick up and move, it's like, hey, my doctor's not here anymore. And he's like, well, I moved over here because it was more convenient. No. And so, no, you want to know that your doctor's there when you need your doctor. So, doctors probably really not all that footloose. And then, so how close does a store or service need to be to the people? So the smaller the scale of a business, and the more it caters to the people rather than other businesses, and cannot operate remotely, the closer it needs to be to the people. So when you think about like a grocery store, there's grocery stores all over the place, right? And why are they all over the place? Because they need to be able to, be close to the people, because people need to go pick up their groceries. Okay, so this is one of my favorite Human Geo movies we show at the end of the year. I don't know if we'll get to do it this year, but it's called Outsourced, and my Indian students say it's a little cringy for them, and I understand why. It's a little cringy for them, but anyway, it's a cute movie. But what it's the main thrust of the movie is that the white guy, he's living up in the United States in Seattle, and his company wants to cut costs, so they're going to take their call centers, which basically don't even exist. So I don't know when this movie was made. I would say like sometime in the early 2000s, like before like the internet had taken over our lives. People, when they ordered something, they wouldn't necessarily order everything online and not deal with a human being. They would order by calling on the phone and say, hey, I want to get, item number 454C or whatever. And they're like, oh, is that the, cheesehead hat? And it's like, yeah, that's the cheesehead hat. Okay, fill my order. So it used to be something people did on the phone. And it's funny, like, I like this movie and it's applicable to the class, but I think about it, like, nobody's even using call centers anymore, except for if it's like for tech or things like that, right? It's just call centers
have become almost a thing of the past. Not quite, but almost. Okay. So what happens with a lot of companies is that they decide that there's certain parts of their business, like a call center, that can be done cheaper overseas. And India is a really popular place for this work to be done because one of the official languages of India is English. So a lot of people in India speak English. So they are able to interact with American companies pretty well, and also possibly American customers pretty well. And so that type of office, like a call center or maybe accounting or some kind of computer tech support, whatever, that would be considered the back office. So I don't know why they call it that, but it's the back office. The front office would be the headquarters of a company. So it is, the company headquarters, like where all the CEOs and all the support staff for those people are. Now, outsourcing is when you actually hire another company to take care of part of your business. So you're not the employer. So let's say that Coca-Cola, I'm going to give you a scenario and you guys are going to be writing a scenario. Can you use my scenario? Sure. So let's say that Coca-Cola's front office is in Atlanta. I have no idea if it is, okay? And let's say they want to outsource their payroll. So payroll is like how the people, the employees get paid. And so they're going to outsource their payroll. And so, all the checks and all that stuff that has to be issued, they're going to outsource that to another company. And that other company may be in India, I don't know, or it could be in Wichita, Kansas. I don't know, but it's not in Atlanta. Okay, and that company is not owned by Coca-Cola. That company that they are outsourcing for payroll is like, I don't know, Acme Payroll Company, but Coca-Cola is paying Acme Payroll Company to take care of their payroll. And so that is called outsourcing. So that's called outsourcing. Now, if Coca-Cola said, hey, I think we can do it cheaper another way. Instead of employing Acme Payroll, what we're going to do is we are going to offshore and we're going to open up a Coca-Cola payroll office in India. And so this Coca-Cola payroll office in India is going to handle all of our payroll for our company, and it's going to be owned by Coca-Cola. So outsourcing means the company is separate, but they're providing a service to the main company, the main headquarter front office company. Offshoring means that that entity is actually owned and run by, and so the people who are the employees would be the employees of Coca-Cola. So all the payroll employees in India would be employees of Coca-Cola. Why would Coca-Cola do that? Because they could pay these employees less. Okay, so that's why they would offshore. Okay guys, this is our last slide. And industrialization. What are the positives of industrialization? It has brought more people out of poverty. It has just, in a lot of ways, just improved the living conditions for so many people. It has improved medicine. It has improved mobility. It's made a lot of people's lives a lot better. Okay, so the middle class was created from factory managers and business owners and professionals. So prior to the Industrial Revolution, you basically had a handful of elite people. Most of them would be considered in like the kind of like the ruling class. So we're talking about like lords and ladies in England and earls and dukes and I don't know, all that British royalty stuff. Okay, so they were part of that landowning ruling class, and then everybody else was poor. Pretty much everyone else was poor. And So industrialization has allowed more and more people to enter the middle class. So we're not looking at like 95% poverty rates now. We're maybe looking at worldwide, I don't know what they are, maybe 20% poverty rates, and absolute horrible, miserable poverty rates. Those are maybe around 1/7. What is the percentage for 1/7? I don't know, you math people. Okay, so 1/7 of the population is in an abject poverty, which is still a lot, right? But it's not like it was. It's not 95% in abject poverty. So it has made the world better. The working class have also started working closer together so that it's allowed them to unionize, and when they unionized, they were able to improve working conditions, because what unionization did is it allowed people to say, hey, we're going to join together, and if they don't pay us what we want to be paid or treat us how we want to be treated, we're all going to walk off the job together. And so it gave the workers more power than they'd ever had before. So there are a lot of positives of industrialization just for mankind. It has been huge. Now there's negatives, right? We all know about global warming and how awful that is. We know about all the things that are polluting the earth that have come about because of industrialization. But it's really important to recognize the positives, because when we dwell on the negatives, and we forget the positives, we can become really dejected about everything that's going on, and it's really not a truthful way of looking at the world. So you've got to look at both sides. So I want you to look at both sides. Now, you can see this is a blue title with a line underneath it, so it is a link to another video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that video in with a separate attachment in the Google Classroom. I'm going to put them basically together with this video is what I'm saying. So you're going to have two videos to watch. Yes, I want you to watch it. Yes, I think it's important. So you do need to watch that, and I do want you to take some notes. Now, it's kind of a fun video, so he's going to ask you some questions. I want you to take the quiz. He's going to have you do a little quiz. I do this in class normally, and we talk about it. But he's going to ask you a few questions. I do want you to answer them in your notebook, and it's okay if you get them all wrong. Elmer, I'm talking to you. It's okay if you get them all wrong, because that means you're going to learn something from it if you get them all wrong. So it's okay. So just answer your gut instinct. Like, what do you think the answer is? Okay? So that is the other thing you're going to be doing with this, and then you'll be turning in your notes.